Whew. Okay, I'm going to try and contain my anger here. I've just come back from Conservative Party conference. We spent the day yesterday interviewing Tories. We ran after the Prime Minister and his senior colleagues and spoke to the likes of Nigel Farage, whose ideology has taken over the Conservatives wholesale. That video will be out on Wednesday, and I think you won't want to miss it. Now, I want to talk principally about Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and the descent of the Conservatives in general into far-right conspiratorial poison. Now, Braverman has already done a speech last week denouncing multiculturalism, claiming migrants are an existential threat to Western civilization and bemoaning the number of children born to foreign-born mothers. Now, in her speech to Conservative Party conference, she's gone further.
The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming.
A hurricane. This is nothing short of an attempt to terrify the British people about migrants and refugees. Hurricanes are catastrophic weather systems which kill and inflict massive damage. That is, of course, the imagery that appears in people's heads. That is how she's positioning migrants and refugees. Now, let's listen to about how she discusses the Human Rights Act.
Our country has become enmeshed in a dense net of international rules that were designed for another era. And it is Labour that turbocharged their impact by passing the misnamed Human Rights Act. I'm surprised they didn't call it the Criminal Rights Act.
Now, it's striking actually that she denounces the left for criticising the racism of Winston Churchill, who she describes as our greatest ever leader. But if we're going to be strictly accurate, the basis of the European Convention on Human Rights, which forms the basis of the Human Rights Act, was partly inspired by Winston Churchill, and British lawyers played a pivotal role in drawing it up. Now, her contempt for laws which protect the rights and freedoms of our citizens, the people of this country, human beings, they're called human rights, places us squarely in the tradition of far-right populism. This is the sort of stuff you expect from Viktor Orban, the authoritarian far-right leader of Hungary. Now, let's hear now her denunciation of what she calls luxury beliefs.
And I know there are some who think that emphasising the importance of law and order or secure borders is unedifying. They look down on those of us who care about such things. Of course, they are entitled to their beliefs. But let's be honest, these are luxury beliefs. What do I mean by that? Our politically correct critics have money, they have status, they have loud voices. They have the luxury of promoting seductive but irresponsible ideas, safe in the knowledge that their privilege will insulate them from any collateral damage. The luxury beliefs brigade sit in their ivory towers telling ordinary people that they are morally deficient because they dare to get upset about the impact of illegal migration, net zero, or habitual criminals. And you can be sure of one thing. People with luxury beliefs will flock to Labour at the next general election because that's the way to get the kind of society they want. What is that? They want, and they like, open borders. The migrants coming in won't be taking their jobs. In fact, they're more likely to have them mowing their lawns or cleaning their homes. They love soft sentences because the criminals who benefit from such ostentatious compassion won't be terrorising their streets or grooming their children. They're desperate to reverse Brexit. They think patriotism is embarrassing and have no use for their British passport unless it's taking them to their second homes in Tuscany or the Dordogne.
It is perverse how the Conservatives have raided class politics from the left and turned it into something disturbing and sinister. You see, for those of us on the left, we see class politics as about who's got wealth and power and who doesn't. Very clear, obvious divide in British society. It's nothing personal. It's about systems. It's not about bad individuals at the top and you replace them with good individuals. It's about how the system we have, the economic system, concentrates wealth and power in the hands of a relative few at the expense of the majority. We look at how the interests of bosses, driven by the profit motive, are on a collision course with the interests of workers who want better wages and terms and conditions. Now, the Conservatives are the party of the rich. They are bankrolled by bankers, hedge funds and big business people. That is the Conservative donor class. They champion the interests of the rich by slashing their taxes, handing them public assets, smashing trade unions and the ability of workers to organise, and treating workers through their laws as hire and fire commodities. But they now seek to redefine class to mean ordinary people as nationalistic, so ordinary people as nationalistic, contemptuous of multiculturalism and opposed to immigration. That what they regard or define as ordinary people is defined by a belief system, not by their economic position. And they're up against the supposed wealthy urban elite who like multiculturalism, who aren't hostile to immigration, and who are defamed as hating their own country. Now, the truth actually is those with the most progressive opinions on issues like immigration and multiculturalism are younger people. And younger people are disproportionately those in low-paid and insecure jobs, saddled with debt, unlikely to own their own homes, or indeed any assets. The idea they own 2 homes, they don't even own one. Instead, they're paying through the nose to private landlords. They are, supposedly, this generation, shafted by Conservative rule, is in the fevered, delusional and hateful world of Suella Braverman, the elite who run the country, rather than the Conservative Party bankrolled by wealthy interests who the Conservative Party exists to represent. It's not just a grotesque lie, it's the world turned upside down. Now let's move on to another episode in this speech. Andrew Boff is the Conservative chair of the London Assembly. He's a gay Tory, and he mildly objected to Braverman's speech. This doesn't even qualify as a heckle. Just watch this, what happened.
You don't challenge this poison. Things just get worse.
There's no such thing as gender
Whole
ideology.
institutions become captured.
No.
And
no,
of course,
this is
as always happens when the left gets the upper hand, those who fail to conform are persecuted, chased out of their jobs for saying that a man can't be a woman, scolded for rejecting that they're beneficiaries of institutions.
Well, if you think that's bad, now watch him being manhandled by security and the police.
My name's Andrew Boff. I'm a member of the London Assembly. But
you're a Tory, aren't you?
I'm a loyal Tory for 50 years.
So why are you saying that to? Why are you saying that to?
Why are you saying trash about gender ideology is making our Conservative Party look transphobic and homophobic? This is not what the Conservative Party is about. We have a proud record of standing up.
What the hell's going on here then? What's happening here? Many things to say. We're the party of free speech. Our opponents are intolerant and shut down opposition. You've thrown out a member of your own party for mildly dissenting in a conference hall to one of your speeches. The party of free speech. That's how they deal with being mildly challenged by their own people. The whole thing was always a lie. You can see that with their attacks on the legal positions of trade unions, on workers being able to organise, and on the right to protest. What the hell are those cops doing there? What the hell are those police officers doing there? What crime has been committed? Why is he being aggressively manhandled and ejected? So are the police now the private security guards of the Conservative Party? Is this Putin's Russia? Now let's go even further than that. You see, Andrew Boff is a gay man being forcibly ejected from his party's conference by Greater Manchester Police after he politely objected to Braverman's anti-LGBTQ positioning. And indeed, she is demonising gay refugees, and she is whipping up bigotry against trans people. Look at what is happening in this country. It began with an anti-trans moral panic. It escalated to an anti-LGBTQ backlash, and we are now at the stage of a gay Conservative politician being dragged forcibly from his own conference by police officers for objecting to the anti-LGBTQ record of his own government. And let's talk about Greater Manchester Police, because they have a dark, dark recent history, and if they're going to behave like this, we're going to talk about it. Because in the 1980s, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police said, and no, this is not a joke, do Google it, this actually happened, he said those with HIV/AIDS were swirling in a cesspit of their own making. He declared in the 1980s that gay sex was an abhorrent offence condemned by the word of God and it ought to be against the criminal law. He was Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police until 1991. I was a kid in Greater Manchester at the time, not that long ago. And that force at the moment stands accused by the LGBTQ community in Greater Manchester of failing to defend businesses in the gay village from recent attacks while acting as the private security army of the Conservative Party, up to and including dragging out gay Tory politicians when they object to the LGBTQ record, politely, of their own party. Shame on them. They've exposed themselves and we need to kick up a fuss. A line has to be drawn here. This is escalating out of control. This isn't funny. It's not funny at all. Now, some of you might go, oh, you know, Owen, you're obviously scared. You're scared of them. You know, you keep going on about how they're doomed to lose the next election. But if you're so certain that the next election's in the bag for the Labour Party, then why are you bothered? Why do you care? They're going to lose anyway. Well, firstly, they can do quite a lot of damage in the last year. These maniacs are going to still be in office. They've been taken over by Farage, with the likes of Rishi Sunak making it clear that Nigel Farage could join. I spoke to Nigel Farage. He's quite clear that if the likes of Suella Braverman take over, he's, I would say, minded to join. That's the impression I got from talking to him. You'll see that in the interview that I did with him. When Rishi Sunak goes, this lot will take over completely. And you can see this. They're going on that using right-wing conspiratorial tropes about 15-minute cities. I mean, they've gone down the rabbit hole. And my fear is this, very straightforward. I think the opposition suck. And some of you are going to get angry when you hear that. You're like, well, Owen, you can't just castigate the Tories and go and how awful they are when the only way of getting rid of them is the Labour Party. I get that. I understand that. But the problem is that if we end up with the Conservative Party taken over by these fanatics completely, and they're only heading in one direction, the Conservatives, and we have a Labour government that comes to power and doesn't address the problems, the crises that define this country, then what happens after one term? Well, these people could come back, but they would be, in that eventuality, far scarier and far more dangerous than ever. In the same way that we can see what's happened to Trump's Republican Party. Well, a lot of people before Trump came to power were like, well, look at how mad they've gone. That's made them unelectable. Oops. Look what's happened to Hungary, a supposedly centre-right party that turned into a bunch of far-right nutcases. It's a worrying time because I think they will lose. And I'll rejoice when the Conservatives lose. Of course I will. But if you think that this increasingly fanatical party will just rule itself out of office forever by going extreme, well, I'm not so sure. And that should, in my view, scare all of us. You'll see my video tomorrow, but in the meantime, please like and subscribe. Do support us on patreon.com/OwenJones84 to keep the show on the road. Listen to us on the podcast, and I will speak to you soon.